up for others and ourselves to our children? An expert weighs in when we come back.
Here is a current event. Here we unlearn, knowing race is an invention, knowing power is a public health issue, knowing the revolution will have to be collaborative.
Talk more about the vital conversations that should be happening within families is author, speaker, educator, and founder of Race, Class, and Parenting, Dr. Mimi Nartey. Dr. Nartey, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And when it comes to Black families, there is something that is known as the talk, and so when and how should this conversation take place, and how can Black parents explain what's happening in the world to young children, especially when you see these violent images that precede a person's death, such as, the case of George Floyd? You see that video over and over again.
From the perspective of a Black mother in particular, it's really important to me to be able to make my children aware, but also to protect their sense of optimism and their sense of hope. And so we need real tools and real strategies to be able to articulate these things in developmentally appropriate ways, and to let our children be cautious when necessary, but also still be hopeful and optimistic about the future, and also appreciate some of the progress that has been made at this point.
Yeah, and I think what can be the case with, the racism that's so present, in our society, can be the case for some Black children. They may want to reject the color of their skin, and reject the harsh realities associated with it, protect themselves. So how can we teach our children that you gotta love who you are, you gotta love that skin you're in, you have to love your body?
There's a couple of misconceptions right now about privilege, or what I'll say is privilege. The conversations about privilege, and especially white privilege, I think are maybe incomplete. I wouldn't say necessarily developed, but maybe incomplete. Because there are actually many different forms of privilege, and all human beings have advantage and disadvantage, social advantage and social disadvantage. And, in some of the workshops that I do with parents and families and school educators, I try to use the analogy that we are all kind of managing a social budget. It's almost like a spreadsheet where we have things that would be positive and things that would be detractors from our little balance sheet, our social balance sheet, or bank account. That all often goes over well with the children to just explain a bank account. So where you may have some sort of social disadvantage because of the historical legacy of slavery and racism in this country, skin color, if you have dark skin color, that could be perceived as a disadvantage. But there are so many other advantages that we also have to lean into. And so I think that's a really important starting place for parents of children of color, Black or other ethnicities and races, for them to understand that this is one aspect and one component of who you are. And yes, you may have some social vulnerability associated with being a Black child in the United States, but there are so many other opportunities that are afforded to you. I talk about things that are absolute, things that are malleable or flexible, and things that are just completely relative. And privilege is, usually based on it's things that are actually relative. So fortunately for us in our own family, we're a bicultural household. So my husband and I, both our fathers are from West Africa. And so we have the opportunity to go to a place where skin color doesn't mean the same thing as it does here. And even though, everybody doesn't necessarily get that opportunity to experience that, in real time, it's worth exploring and having the conversations with children for them to understand that these are not essential characteristics. There are opportunities to recreate what these mean in a social context, and they're not the only thing that defines them.
I love that. So beautiful to recreate what this means. I love how you phrase that. You recently published an article for the online parenting site Red Tricycle, and it's titled "Words and Phrases That You Might Not Know Are Racist." So I want you to explain to us the importance of the use of language, and particularly the intentionality when it comes to making statements regarding race in the household.
Well, it's funny because I opened up this conversation about the phrases that we might not are racist, just comparing it to, with the metaphor of my own marriage relationship. And I don't know if you're married or if you have a partner, But one thing that you learn when you're in a long-term partnership is that you are going to say things that actually hurt the other person that you care about deeply, and they're going to say things that hurt you. So over time, with great intention and with developing sensitivity, we can be better with our language, be more intentional. The same thing goes for parenting. Once you become a parent, you realize the power that your words have on the self-concept of your children. So, in all things, we are striving to be impeccable with our words. And that doesn't just mean having integrity, but it means really being able to say what we mean and be very intentional. And there's so many phrases and expressions and things that we say that are really so hurtful, from one person to another, especially in the context of race, where, there's been so much pain and hurt historically, that I just think it's really important to give people tools and ideas to be able to, speak better, more in alignment with things that they mean to say.
That's right. You also talking there about, the concept of vulnerability, and it's, an effort associated with that intentionality as well. Dr. Nartey, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the fact that you guys are, taking time to incorporate, what it means to educate our children and how that's a really important continuing process.
Thank you so much.